Very good. Nice to see you, everyone. And welcome to our in-service seminar today, entitled Assessments in Canvas. I'm going to talk today about how to use Canvas to evaluate your students' performance in your course. We'll look at the various assessment instruments available in Canvas and how to deploy them and grade them, and we'll see what they look like to the students when they when they take them. I'll be sharing my screen most of the day, which is surely a blessing to everyone. I don't have to look at me, at least. You will see a little thumbnail of me once the screen comes up, but you can move that around if it happens to occlude something I'm talking about at the time. There's also a little dash in the upper left-hand corner of that video thumbnail box that you can use to minimize it so that it's almost invisible and won't interfere with anything. So let me share my screen. And bring over our outline for today. Basically, we're going to look at the three types of assessment instruments that you have available to you in Canvas. The homework assignment, the graded discussion, and the quiz, which covers all manner of testing from a pop quiz to a final exam. We're going to start with the most authentic, probably the most reliable sort of assessment that you have in any learning management system, in any online or web-enhanced course. It's sometimes just called a homework assignment or just an assignment, but it typically is an activity that's assigned to the students. You give them some directions on what to do. And in order to fulfill that assignment, the student will either type something in a text box that you provide to them, or upload a file which contains the results of their work, which you will then be able to access and grade. The most common type of homework assignment, of course, is a writing assignment of some sort, where they write something and turn that into you, either by just typing it into Canvas or by uploading it as a Word document. But there are lots of other things that they can submit in this way, PowerPoint presentations, CAD drawings, anything that they might create on their computer. Or they can even record something that they're doing on their computer and send that to you in the form of a screencast. You're limited, as usual, with instructional tools like this, only by your own imagination. So let's start by looking at homework assignments in Canvas. Let me pull this away for the moment and bring Canvas over. What I have here is a little demonstration course that I often use in these sessions. It was based on an online flex offering that I did years ago on Blackboard on the technique of screencasting. I think probably most of you were in my screencasting course earlier this semester, but screencasting is essentially the process of recording your computer screen in full motion. So as you change things on the screen, you record that so that somebody watching the recording sees what they would see if they were looking over your shoulder. And along with that recording, there's generally a voiceover that you record using a microphone. And the two are combined and then placed online so that students can see and hear exactly what they would have seen and heard if they were sitting there with you in front of your computer watching you do something. An incredibly powerful instructional tool, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. That's just the subject of this course, to give you just enough background for some of what give you a little frame of reference for the the various assignments and quizzes and things like that we're going to look at and create today. So, assignments. How do you, first thing we might want to know, or the first thing we'll cover, is how to create a homework assignment or an assignment in Canvas. There, as often is the case, there are more than one way to do that. We can go to the Assignments tool in the course menu. This Assignments tool is quite a bit different from the Assignments content area that you may remember from Blackboard that we used. This is a listing of every gradable item in the course. The items can be grouped into so-called assignment groups, which contain gradable items that are related in some way. You can create as many groups as you like over here using this button, and you can name them anything you want. So you can arrange your assignment groups logically, or your assignments among assignment groups logically in any way that makes sense for your course organization. In this course, I've decided to create assignment groups according to assessment type. And as I mentioned, there are three. There are quizzes or tests. I've just called this assignment group tests. There are graded discussion forums, and there are homework assignments of the type that I've just described that we're going to talk about first. These all require some sort of response from the students in the form of entering something into a text box or uploading a file to Canvas. And apologies for the ambiguity of the word assignment in Canvas. And the word assignment in Canvas is used to designate any sort of gradable item. So it could be a homework assignment, it could be a graded discussion, it could be a quiz or test. All of those are termed assignments in Canvas. So there's sometimes a little confusion there, but you can mitigate that by making appropriate assignment groups and putting your assignments putting your gradable items into the appropriate group. So I can make a homework assignment by clicking this Add Assignment button right here. Excuse me. Or I can go to my modules and make them from there. Here I have an opening module, and I'll just put my assignment in this module, so I can have a place to put it here. And I can create assignments, or indeed most any other type of content item, from the modules tool, as well as from other tools in the course menu. And that's true of assignments as well. To create an assignment or any gradable or content item, any assessment item or any content item in a module, you just go to the title line of the module, go across to the right and click the big plus sign in that line. And you're allowed to add an item to module 1. And among the things you can add to this module are assignments. In this case, ambiguously enough, Canvas is using the word assignment to mean a homework assignment, the type of gradable item we're talking about right now. Be nice if they were a little more consistent with the use of that word. Or a quiz, or a discussion forum, which may or may not be gradable, depending on how you set it up. Files and pages are, of course, content items and not directly assessments in themselves. So our three assessment types are laid out here again: the homework assignment, quiz, and the gradable discussion. So we're going to make an assignment. These are some assignments already present in the course. If I've already made the assignment and I just want to put a link to it in the module, I can select that assignment here and just add item. But this is a new, we're going to make a new assignment in order to illustrate the process. So we'll click New Assignment. and we're asked to give the assignment a name. And I'm just going to call this sample screencasting assignment. I could call it Fred if that made sense. Doesn't matter. And I'm not going to worry about indentation. So that's all I have to do right now is give it a name and add the item to the module. It appears at the bottom of the module. You can move it around if that's appropriate. And you can even move it to another module if you need to. But in order to actually work with the assignment, to actually make something of it, we'll need to access the assignment by just clicking on its name here. And that will get us to an assignment page or an assignment screen. This is exactly where we would have gone if we had just gone to the assignments tool and clicked on add assignment. It would drop us right here, and instead of having this title already created, you'd have to enter it. But other than that, we're in the same spot. But it's just an empty assignment at this point. This is just a shell of an assignment. To actually enter content into the assignment, we're going to edit it. And here's our assignment name. That's the only thing we've put in so far. We can edit that at this point if we wish. If not, we can go straight ahead to typing in the instructions for the assignment that tell the students what to do in order to satisfy this assignment. And I think I have some text over here that I can copy so you don't have to watch me type, which is an extremely painful process, for both of us. So let me just paste some text in here. You can paste text in from a Word document, which is what I'm doing, or anything else, or you can type it in here directly. All right, here are the instructions for this assignment. Name a free or inexpensive screencasting tool. In other words, a piece of software that can be used to create screencasts. And once you do that, list one particular advantage for this particular tool, one disadvantage, and use it. Create a short screencast and upload it to YouTube and provide the share URL. I've gone to the trouble here, mainly for my own benefit, of indicating numbers of points here. That's optional at this point, obviously. There are other ways to do that, but this helps me remember what I'm going to do here in a minute when we start doing things like creating rubrics. But there's the text that the students will need in order to figure out what to do to fulfill this assignment. Then we just work our way down this form entry page here now. Points here would be, obviously I'd intended this to be 20 points. The next thing I have to decide is what assignment group to assign this to. In your...
I don't know that.
Sorry about that. That little interjection from the peanut gallery there was the Amazon smart speaker. I can't say her name, or God knows what we'll get into, that I'm using as a speaker system for this computer. Every now and then she thinks she hears her name. So if that happens again, we're not actually being recorded by Amazon, I don't think. The blank shells that you're provided, either for development shells or as live shells for your online and web enhanced courses, have by default only one assignment group in them. That assignment group is entitled assignments, plural. And if you're not going to weight your grades by assignment group, you don't have to make more assignment groups. You can just drop everything into the default single existing assignment group and not worry about it. It's only if you're going to be calculating grades by weighting assignment groups rather than weighting individual assignments, that you need to worry about the assignment groups. That's what I've done in this course. So I have the 3 assignment groups here. And this one obviously fits into the assignment group, that is homework assignments. I could have called that homework assignments if I'd been smart enough. How do I want to display the grade to the student? Points is the default, but you can also do it by percentage, or the percentage of possible points that they earned, by a letter grade, a GPA, 4 to 0, 4.0 down to 0, or you can not grade the assignment. It can just be an exercise that students do in order to help them along in doing something else in the course. That's not going to motivate them very much to actually pay much attention to it, but there are times when that's appropriate. Or you can just set the grade to complete, incomplete, or satisfactory, unsatisfactory if you prefer, so that it's a check off. They have to do it, but they don't get any credit for it. Should you want to make sure this does not count toward the final grade, you can check this checkbox here. That's usually used for more value added, more unusual uses of this assignment tool. You don't often use that. The next thing you have to decide is the submission type. How are the students going to submit this? And there are a number of options. They can submit it, first off, at the highest level, they can submit the assignment online so that they don't actually have to hand it to you or get it to you in some other way, physically, snail mail or whatever. You can select on paper if this is a web enhanced course and you're actually meeting, meeting with the students face to face, and they can hand it to you face to face. That tells Canvas not to provide the student with a means to turn in the assignment online, and just saves a little overhead. Or it can be through an external tool like a publisher's website, like My Whatever Lab. By far the most common selection here is online. Oh, and the other option is no submission, that this is just some sort of informational instrument that will create a column in the grade book, but that the students do not have to submit anything for. And that's like if you wanted to just make a note in the grade book that the student had turned in perhaps a behavior contract that came out with their syllabus or something like that. You just wanted to be able to note that in grade book, but you didn't want to have to, they didn't have to submit any homework assignment to do that. There are a variety of ways how you might use that no submission option, but by far the most common is the online submission type. And once you select that, you get some more options. They can turn in their work online. They can just do that by typing something into a text box that Canvas provides them with. They can provide a website URL that satisfies the question, though they can also just type the website URL in the text entry box. So I'm never quite sure why this option is here really as a separate option. I'm sure there's some reason for that. They can upload a media recording to satisfy the assignment if that's appropriate, or they can upload a file. And of course, by far the most common option here is file upload. So they're going to create a file, maybe a Word document, maybe a PowerPoint presentation, maybe an Excel spreadsheet, maybe something else entirely, offline, and then they're going to upload that file to you so that you can look at it in Canvas maybe download it to your local computer and work with it, grade it, and send them the grade and feedback.
Now, could I ask a question here?
Please, absolutely.
So in the media recordings, do they have the option, does the student have the option of recording directly into the answer, or that would probably be open up a whole new can of worms?
I don't think so, but we can try that in a minute and see. That's a good question. Okay. I hadn't considered that. We'll make one here in a minute, that make an assignment real quick that has a media recording option, and look at it and see what happens.
Great.
Good question. Thank you. And the rest of you, please jump in like that when you have a question. Don't wait for it, because sometimes it leads us off in interesting directions. It's not uncommon to include a text entry box along with a file upload, just in case the student just can't get that file to upload for some reason, and then copy and paste from it into the text entry box. It's not ideal, but sometimes it does give them a way to avoid total failure. But that's an option for you. You can have both options here. Now, let me throw the media recording in as an option too. We'll see how that looks. If you're going to have them upload files, the problem we used to have all the time with Blackboard was that students would upload a writing assignment in some format that the instructor couldn't open. The instructor was probably expecting a Word document, and may have even specifically required a Word document, but the student uploaded say an Apple Page or something, like a Pages document or something. And the instructor, not having a Mac, didn't have any way to open that. And that involved a back and forth and a lot of hassle. So you can, if you wish, prevent that sort of thing by restricting file upload types. You just have to know enough to know the extension, the file extension for a particular type of file that you want. Like one of the common options is this one, .doc, and then a comma to indicate that there is more than one, and a .docx. And those are, let me see, is there a comma there? Yes. No, that's just a dot. So there should be a space in between those. Sorry. Those are, of course, extensions for Word documents, the docx being the more modern one. I doubt anybody has a version of Microsoft Word anymore that creates documents as .doc extension files, but you never know. So that will prevent the students from uploading anything but a Word document. You can add others here as well. So that's a pretty typical set of options there, except for the media recording, which I'm including here because of Phil's question. Next, at least for the next little while on our system, you can also automatically submit anything that the student uploads for plagiarism review, plagiarism checking. We do still have Unicheck available. I am not going to check that here because I don't intend to send that to Unicheck, but you can automatically have your submissions, homework submissions, checked for plagiarism, and the plagiarism reports will come right back to you in your speed grader, so in your grading interface. So that's kind of nice, and I know they're moving heaven and earth to try to keep that for everyone. They're trying to find funding for it in a very tight funding environment right now. It is not an inexpensive tool. Indeed, the near monopolistically provided tool right now in this country is Turnitin for plagiarism review, and Turnitin would cost us more than what Blackboard used to cost us in its entirety. and the money's just not available for that. The unit check tool is actually an excellent tool that integrates better with Canvas than Turnitin does. The only rather exotic thing about it is that it's created by a company that's based in the Ukraine. We've been on Zoom with folks from Kiev any number of times about this. So, but it's an excellent tool. It really works better than Turnitin in some ways, and it certainly integrates better with Canvas. So we'll hope that that continues. But that's how you select it, and then you have some options that you can take here, which are usually pretty straightforward. But we'll just turn that to none right now. By default, you can change this, but by default, the report of submission, that is a receipt that says, okay, I got it, your instructor has it, you don't have to worry about it, is shown to the student immediately. And that's, if you do an online one, that's the way it's gonna be. You can set this up as a group assignment. As in most LMSs, you can create student groups in your courses in Canvas, and you can assign different assignments to different groups. And in the case of a group assignment, a grade is assigned. Normally a grade is assigned to the group. Everybody gets the same grade because the group all worked on it. However, you can assign grades to students individually if you desire, which is an option we didn't have in Blackboard. That's kind of nice. We don't have time to go into group operations in Canvas. We've got another seminar on that coming up later in the semester. Another thing we didn't have in Blackboard that we have in Canvas is the option to require peer reviews, so that students can in effect help evaluate each other's work. And you can assign peer reviews manually or automatically, and then Canvas will ask you some more questions about how many peer reviews should each student be assigned and things like that. And you can even have them be anonymous so that students are not so reluctant to provide constructive evaluation of their peers' work, though that can be problematic too. So that's why that's not a default. But we're not going to require peer review here. Assign the, and here we decide who is assigned this assignment. The default is everyone in the course, and that'll be the vast majority of cases. And more about that in a second. The dates here are fairly similar to what we used to have in Blackboard. You have a due date. It's really important that you set a due date, because obviously you want the students to turn this in a timely fashion. And when you set a due date, an entry is automatically created in the student's calendar. So when they look at their calendar, they'll see, oh, that's due today, or that's due next week, or whatever, and they won't be quite as much of a surprise to them. You can set the due dates through this little date tool here by just clicking on the little calendar icon. And let's say we want that turned in on the 28th. We can set a time. The default time is the end of the day, 11:59 p.m. You can vary that here by typing in a time. But usually just the end of day is the option. You can also determine when the students can see the assignment. You can set availability from maybe tomorrow. You don't want them to see it today for some reason. The default time there is 12 a.m., beginning of the day. that's the time when the student can first see the assignment. And you can set a end availability time, after which the student can't even see the assignment, much less submit it. It's not unusual to have that be the same as the due date, but you can put it afterwards if you wish. Say you give partial credit to somebody who turned it in late, you can set that up. And so the until date and the due date don't have to be the same. You can even set this up so that the student automatically gets deducted a certain amount of the possible grade for each day or hour beyond the due date. So that's more a style thing than anything else. Then we have this little add button down here. This allows you to assign or to set the assignment up so that students can take the assignment early, or can satisfy the assignment early or late, if there's a good reason for that. Say you have somebody leaving town before the due date and they want to be able to or perhaps even before the availability date, you want to give them early access to it. Or perhaps they have a good reason for not being able to turn in the assignment on time, which is more of a likely situation. And they want to be able to turn it in late, perhaps even after the until date. And there's a reasonable reason they're in the hospital having surgery or something like that. You can add another assignment. And let's say this student test 3 here is in the hospital and is not going to be out in time to turn in the assignment by March the 7th. You can assign the assignment to them. Notice that changes everyone up here to everyone else. So it's still all the same assignment, which is just one column in the grade book, but this assignment now, this student now, you can give a different due date. Let's say we might make the due date the 14th of March. They're not having heart transplant surgery, so they'll be able to do it by then. And you can make it available from whenever you like, and available until the 14th, perhaps. And that's a separate set of date requirements for that student. And of course, you can make that more than one student. You can, excuse me, assign it to more than one student can have this option as well. Though for each difference, yes.
Dave, as well.
Yes.
So I actually have a very technical question now.
Okay.
Suppose I have peer reviews for an assignment.
Right.
And I'm anticipating that some students have let me know they're going to be out of town for that submission. The peer reviews have sort of a date, right?
Yeah, they have a date by which they must be submitted.
Well, right. Well, let me try to say this. So so say the assignment is due on Tuesday. Usually so the assignment is due Tuesday midnight. Then I'll be like, at 12:15, the peer reviews are automatically assigned, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the student emails me Tuesday evening and says they can't submit their work at midnight, but they could submit it tomorrow at 12. Then there's no way for me at that point, unless I change the peer review assignment for that student to participate in the peer review, because they're not going to be automatically assigned. Is there
Okay.
any way to deal with that?
I don't think there's any way to automatically deal with that. I don't think you have
Okay.
an option to delay peer review. I will check on that, though. I'm not certain that that's the
Okay.
case.
Because I mean, I frequently
But-
have students who miss, the submission,
Oh, yeah.
and then they don't participate in the peer review. So
Right.
I'm trying to figure out a way to.
You would probably have to just build some elasticity into that peer review
Right.
deadline.
Right.
But then, of course, nobody will do it until late as
Yeah. Right.
possible.
Right. Okay.
So
Cool.
I'll look into that, though. That's a good question, to see if there's any flexibility there. That's Canvas doesn't tend to provide every possible option that might be useful.
Yeah.
That was more an ethos applied to the Blackboard, applied to their system.
Okay.
And that was a wonderful thing in some ways. Even if a relatively small group of people requested a certain feature, it would often show up in Blackboard.
Okay.
But before long, Blackboard got so feature-ridden
Right.
that even simple things became almost impossibly complex to do.
I remember.
Yes, as you probably well remember, and that created an opportunity for a company like Instructure to come along and create something that was relatively simple, that
Right.
didn't have every possible option built into it, but it was relatively simple to use. So that's why you might not find that sort of thing in Canvas.
Okay. Cool.
So,
All right.
thanks so much for the question. That allowed me to bring that little factor in. So I love these questions. Please keep them coming. Very well. That's pretty much got the assignment ready to go. So now I can save that assignment, or if I'm really ready to go, I can save it and publish it and make it available to students immediately. But I'm gonna hold off on that for a second. I'm just going to save the assignment for a second. And now you go back to this assignment status screen, if you will. Here's the assignment instructions, the points, the type of submission, the file types allowable, and the due dates and availability dates, all listed neatly for you to look at. And it lists, it reminds you that the bulk of the submissions are going to be due on March the 7th, are going to be available until maybe turned into March the 7th. And but there's one student who can wait till March 14th. Just a little reminder for you. Very well. And that assignment is now ready to go. To make it accessible to students, all we would have to do is publish it. If we go back to our module where we put that assignment in, where we started creating it, we see there it is. And there's it is published. So it's ready to go. Students can see that now. Click here and go in and submit the assignment. This is not what the student sees when they go to submit the assignment. We'll see that in a minute. But anyway, that assignment is now live and ready to go. So what else might we need to do with it? Well, particularly in a fairly well-defined assignment like this, where they credit how much credit is available for each piece of the assignment is specified, it can be very useful both for you and for the student to have a rubric associated with this assignment. A rubric that defines how much exactly how much each part of the assignment is worth, so that grading the assignment becomes really simple, or shall we say much more streamlined than would otherwise be the case, where you have to keep book in your head. Well, they got that part of it, but they didn't exactly get that. This was worth that much, and that maybe I get partial credit for this, and so on. A rubric really makes that consideration process that you go through when you're grading such an assignment much easier to follow, much quicker, and much more consistent from one student to the next. Also, a rubric is by default visible to students so they can see how they're going to be evaluated. And that will inform how much effort they put into each part of the assignment, and it gives them a really good idea of what you're expecting, so that they're not surprised to think they did great and find they got half credit or less on the assignment. So a rubric is a wonderful thing. And in Canvas, it's pretty quick to create and to link to an assignment. We just, right from the assignment status page here, we can add a rubric. We can create a rubric for the, or use an existing rubric if we already have one that would do. If a rubric's been made generic enough to cover most any sort of assignment, that you can pull it up and use it here. But let's assume we need to create an assignment here. And I'm going to call this a, let's call it sample screencasting assignment rubric. I'm probably not going to use this one for another assignment, but I can title it any way I like. And then I'm given a form template where I can start creating my rubric by just filling things into these rectangles on Canvas. The horizontal rows in a rubric are so-called criteria, things that criteria that the students should meet in order to satisfy the assignment. And there are often multiple criteria for a single assignment. So a rubric will consist of a series of rows divided into columns, and each column in the rubric, the first column in each criterion, is a description of the criterion. The next columns are, and there may be any number of them, are, so they're termed ratings by Canvas. Basically, they're measures of how well the student satisfied this particular criterion. Did they get full credit, no credit, partial credit, and how are you going to determine that? And then the final column in the rubric will be the number of points awarded for this criterion. Each criterion has a set number of points, and that's determined by the number that you assign here. And the default here is 5 points. That happens to be our first criterion for this assignment here, would be that they named a tool that was actually an inexpensive screencasting tool, and just put Microsoft Word there or something like that. So we'll start, we're given one empty criterion to start with. So we'll click that edit button there. Again, maybe a little slower with that. The little pencil is a universal edit symbol used in Canvas and a lot of other software packages. If I want to enter a description for the criterion, I just click that little pencil and I'm able to put in here correct name of tool. I can give it a longer description. The student has entered the name of a screencasting tool that is inexpensive or free. And then I can update the criterion, and then that appears in my description. So I have a meaningful description of my criterion. I know what that means, and the students will know what that means. I can always delete criteria if I decide I don't want them anymore with that little trash can icon, but this looks fine. Now, ratings. By default, you get 2 ratings, full credit, no credit. I got some Brit designing this, apparently, marks. But credit would be another way to say that. So I can fill in the information about each of the ratings the same way by clicking on the little pencil associated with it. First off, assuming this is full credit, how much credit should the student get for successfully achieving this criterion? And it so happens that the default number is right in this case, 5, but that was just a coincidence. Rating title, full marks, that may be all you need in this case. Rating description, student correctly, and you can be as extensive or as efficient as you like about this. Student correctly identified Cool. Okay, full marks. And there might be something in between full credit and no credit here. There might be several levels of partial credit. And I can create as many ratings as I like. I can add a rating just by clicking on this little blue plus sign here. And it knows I gave 5 points, so it's saying maybe 3 points is good for this particular level of partial credit. I'm going to say 2.5. I think I can put I can put a decimal in there. Rating title, partial credit. Rating description, student name of tool not entirely correctly, or something to that effect. And that's 2.5 points. And then I've got no marks down here. I could and I could add another criterion if I like. I can add one in between these two. You know, I got a lot of flexibility in how you create this rubric. I'm just going to leave this as no marks. The student didn't do this. It seems straightforward enough. And the total points for this criterion, informed by how much credit I gave to each rating, is 5 points. Great. But that's not my only criterion here. I also had 3 others. How am I going to deal with those? Well, I can add a criterion. Now I've got this little plus criterion button down here. So I click that, and I get another criterion. And it gives me the option to just duplicate that criterion, or I can make it a new criterion. And this one was advantage. And create the criterion. So let's see, I should have capped that, surely. And this is only 3 points. So I do need to change, I do need to edit this full marks and make that a 3, but you know, I'm not going to provide a lot of verbiage here, mainly in the interests of getting on and talking about gradable discussions and quizzes here in a minute. So creating a rubric initially can take a little time, but it will save you far more time than you ever spend on it. And no marks there, 3, so there's 3 points. Another criterion, new criterion would be disadvantage. I could add a description if I wanted, might be a good idea. And this one was only 2 points, I believe I decided, yeah, so I need to edit that, make that 2 points, update. And then one more criterion was created short screencast, uploaded to YouTube. Now here I'd probably need several ratings. Let's add a criterion. a new criterion. We'll call it Screencast creation and upload, or whatever. If I make this definitive enough, I don't have to add a description. And this one, the total was 10. So full marks here are going to be 10. And I probably need a fairly informative description here. Student created and uploaded screencast and provided URL. Everything they needed to do. Full credit. All right. I probably need something in between that and no marks. This one would be let's see, we'll add, there we go. That's not what I want. Okay, let's see. That is the criterion that's showing up in there. I don't want that. Oh, that's right. This is the rating for that criterion. Rating, here's the rating title. Sorry. All right, let's say this might, since this was worth 10 overall, this one might be 5 points. Rating title. Partial credit. Rating description. Student created screencast and uploaded, but did not, but URL did not work. That's one way to not completely. So if I'm, let's say the student convinced me that they'd done this, but they didn't provide the link to it, so I couldn't look at it. So I'm going to give them partial credit for it. Or no marks, they didn't do it at all. So I now have a complete rubric. The total for the question is 20 points, which is correct. There's the number of points, so everything adds up. This obviously needs to match this, or there will be problems. You do have some options about the rubric. You can, if you say, I'll just write free-form comments, you basically don't have to put in all of these descriptions and so on, but that would sort of like be a rubric that's not really a rubric. You can remove the points from the rubric if you just want to give the students an idea of what you're looking for, but not really make this rubric that useful for grading. I don't recommend that. We don't use outcomes. Use this rubric for assignment grading. Sure, why else did I create it? So that you'll want to check. And then you just click Create Rubric. And there's the rubric. And it's now associated with the homework assignment. It's ready to go. And that pretty much covers how to create an assignment. Questions? All right, moving on. When they come up later, let me know. What do the students see when they look at this? Well, the student is going to see if I go to the home screen, I can find out what the student is going to see by going to Student View and going to the module where the assignment is linked, because that's the only way the student has to access it. And whoops, doesn't look like I'd published that module. Well, I need to leave student view because that module 1 didn't show up. That's my bad. So I go back to modules.
You
And
made
yep,
it available. You made it available tomorrow.
Yeah, that's right. I did. It made the assignment available tomorrow. I sure did, didn't I? So I can publish. I do need to publish this module, but I also probably need to edit this and make it available today if I want the students to see it. So let me go back in, edit the assignment, and make my availability date today. 12 a.m. That should cover the situation. All right, I can save that. Now, since I've published it and the availability date, oops, that was just one person's availability date. Need to get them. Need to get all of them. So Canvas kind of looks after you here. You can see immediately what's going on. February 20th. Need to make this February 20th or 19th as well. Save that. Okay, everybody's availability date now is February 19th. Good. So now if I go back home, and this is why it's always a good idea to check things over in student view before you turn something loose. Go to modules. Module 1 is there, and there's the sample screencasting assignment so the student can get into it. And here's what it looks like to the student. This is the status page that basically just shows them, gives them information about the assignment, and shows them the rubric so that they can, that will inform the process of actually satisfying the assignment. When they actually want to submit the assignment, turn it in, they go to the Submit Assignment button. And they're given those options that we showed before. They can upload a file as the default. They can just choose a file off their computer, select it, open it, and then submit assignment. And that actually submits the file, uploads it to a Dropbox, an assignment Dropbox that was automatically created along with the assignment when you said file upload in the online assignment option, and uploads the file, and it'll be waiting for you there to grade. Alternately, here's text entry. The student could type something here, including the URL for the assignment. Media, let's see, record. Oh, yes, Phil, we can record media. And if I pick my other webcam here, so that the one that's being used with Zoom is not, now that the student can actually submit a media file, or they can upload media files that they have already created, audio files and video files. They have a video file on their computer already. They can upload that file directly here to Canvas. Under record media, their only option is really just a talking head video or a webcam video. So they can't do a screencast here, something like that. If they were going to submit a screencast, which is more likely, they'd have to create that screencast outside of Canvas and then upload it using this tool. So hopefully that answered your question from earlier, Phil. Or if they have the file stored on their Google Drive and they're logged into Google Drive, they can access, and I can't show you that while masquerading as a student. But the student would have their Google Drive come up and they could submit the file from Google Drive. We have had some trouble with that option. That option appears automatically when you select File Upload. And I have seen a number of help tickets come by where students, I'm not quite sure why, but that failed for them. Although in the vast majority of circumstances, it seems to work. But they're safer uploading directly from their local computer. And so that's what it looks, that's what a submission process looks like for a student. So let's go back and look at our outline here and see how we're doing. Now we've gotten through assignments. I'm not going to do the speed grader today. I don't think that, we'll see if I have time to come back to it, but I don't think we're going to have time for that. And we do have a separate grading seminar that shows how to use the speed grader, though the speed grader is basically identical to the inline grading tool that you had in Blackboard. It's provided by the same company. It's a third-party tool that both Instructure and Blackboard contract for and include in their systems. So let's move on to talking about creating and working with graded discussions. Okay, to create a discussion, we have a similar pair of options to what we had with assignments. We can go to the discussions tool in Canvas. Yeah, I'll leave that because I don't actually, oh, and I need to leave student view before I do this. All right, now I can go to the discussion tool and I can see it as an instructor. I've got some discussions here already. If I want to make a new one, I can just go right here. Or I can go to the modules tool and I can create a discussion here in module 1 the same way I created an assignment by going to the big plus sign, selecting discussion this time instead of assignment. Call it a new topic, and we'll call this Screencasting Sample Discussion, for want of a better term. And that's all I have to enter here. That appears in my module. I click on the name of the discussion and I go to the screen whereby I can flesh out this discussion, make it meaningful. It's just a shell right now. So I'll edit this discussion. This is where I would have landed if I just went to the discussions tool in the menu here and said add discussion. I'd end up right here. I'd have to name it. And then I'd be able to provide some directions on how to, what students are supposed to discuss in this particular discussion topic. I have some text over here already typed, which I'll paste in. Okay, this is sort of a combination of a discussion and an assignment. I'll create it. I want them to create a screencast using one of the tools covered in this class and upload it to YouTube. Provide a brief description of the nature and topic of the screencast and post the share URL. Then also provide constructive feedback to one of your peers. Constructive underline, hopefully, by replying to their post. In creating this, I have some options here. Post to all sections. Anytime you see a reference to sections in Canvas, you can pretty much ignore it because they're referring here to virtual sections that you can create in a Canvas shell that allow you to subdivide your enrollments in the shell and so on into separate sections that can be treated more or less separately. We just don't use that functionality in Canvas because it's not consistent with the way that we bring data over from Campus Solutions, from PeopleSoft. We can't populate virtual sections within a single Canvas shell. So each of the sections of a course in Campus Solutions, in PeopleSoft, is given its own separate shell, and there are no virtual sections within that shell. So we just don't use that functionality in Canvas. So you can pretty much ignore that. So you can attach a file to your, if you have a more extensive set of description or set of instructions here for the sample, for the discussion, and you want to upload that as, say, a Word document or something like that, you can do that here. And then you have some options that you can set, relatively limited number of options in this case for discussions. Allow threaded replies always. I don't know why that's an option. I suppose if you want it to be more like a blog, you could disable that, but threaded replies is good. Users must post before seeing replies. In other words, they must fulfill these instructions here before they can see what other people have written. That's often a good idea because it prevents people from just copying directly or more subtly other people's responses. That's often used. Worry about podcast feed. But if discussion is going to be graded, you have to check this box here. And once you do that, a bunch of other options appear. Well, the other main option here is allow liking. That's up to you. If you want to make this like Facebook or something, then fine. I never saw much point in that myself, but it's available. You can make this a group discussion and assign it only to the members of a certain student group. You will set unless this is an extra credit activity, you will need to set a number of points possible. If it were an extra credit activity, you could leave that points possible at 0, and it would be treated as extra credit. Students who contributed and to whom you assigned a grade would get the benefit of that, but students who did not choose to participate would not be penalized. Their grade would not be lowered as a result. So there is a reason perhaps for leaving that at 0, but in most cases we'll have a number of points here. And we have the same options we had with assignments on how to display the grade, points being the most common. And this means display it to the student, to you in the grade book, and to the students in their grades tool in this manner. We can set it, and we can put it in the appropriate assignment group if that's a factor, in this case discussion for this course. We have the same peer review options we had with assignments, and the same option to assign this to everyone or just to certain students. And we can use that option to provide late and early access, just like we could with the homework assignments. Typically, a graded discussion would have a due date. We'll call it, say, March the 7th, just for the heck of it. And if you put nothing here, the discussion will be visible to students throughout the term, which is usually what you want. Once the due date of a discussion is passed, you can go in and mark the discussion as locked so that students can no longer participate, they can no longer post to it, but they can still go back and read it to get the benefit of what was posted in it. And that's the usual circumstance. So that you don't have to set availability dates here, though you can. So that's pretty much the process of creating a gradable discussion. We just save that then. And here it is. We can publish it or not, as we prefer. And at the present time. And then the discussion is ready to go. What does a discussion look like that's actually got some posts in it? Well, let's go back to one here that we already have. This is one with some sample posts in it. You can view it by looking at it here. This was all covered in much more detail in the communication in Canvas seminar earlier. But basically, you have posts, you have replies to posts. You can tell this is a reply to that post because the whole thing is indented and is placed underneath this initial post and is indented. This is a new post unrelated to that one because of the white space in between them, and so on. And here's a reply to that one, and here's a reply to a reply. And this is a thread. So it makes it a lot easier to follow the discussion. I have subscribed to this discussion so that every time anybody posts to it, I get a message in a notification from Canvas, and maybe an email, maybe a text message, maybe a notification through the Canvas mobile app, the teacher mobile app, depending on how I have my notification options set up. But I will get a notification if I'm subscribed anytime somebody posts. You can always unsubscribe from that as well. And save the changes, because that may or may not be appropriate. You may be getting so many notifications you can't keep up with it. Let's see, we've got is there a way to save your outline? Kathy, hi Kathy, welcome. Kathy, by outline, oh, you mean the seminar outline. I have not posted that yet. I will do that momentarily. Thank you for mentioning that. All right. So that's gradable discussions. How to create gradable discussions. And that's the process of utilizing those is pretty straightforward. So I'm going to move right on to the third and probably the most important, well, I won't say that, but maybe one of the more complicated assessment types in Canvas, which is the quiz or the test. And before I do that, I'm going to get a link for you all to this particular outline so that you have that. And now let me put that link in the chat tool for everyone. Make sure I send that to everyone. Press enter, and there it is, Kathy, and for everybody. Thanks for bringing that up. So, quizzes, taking, grading quizzes in Canvas. Again, we can create the quizzes by using the quizzes tool here and selecting add quiz. And the quizzes tool will list all of your quizzes, and you can control the order. Well, actually you can't in this case. We'll list all of your quizzes in the order they were created. And typically you would hide this tool from students. That's more for you than for the students. Otherwise, the students can just go in, pull up the quizzes, and access them one right after another without even looking at anything, any other content. It's more common to put links to your quizzes in your modules, and make the students access the quizzes from there. And I can add a quiz in the module in much the same way that I added a graded discussion or a homework assignment, by clicking the big plus sign and selecting quiz from the add drop-down menu. And I'll make a new quiz. And since this is module 1, I'm just going to call this the module 1 quiz. Obviously, that would vary depending on the context for this quiz. I can put this quiz into the assignment group test, which is all my tests, and I can add the item. Once again, I get just the shell of a quiz, a blank quiz. To actually set up options for this quiz and add questions to it, I click on the name of the quiz, and I edit the quiz. This again is where you would have been dropped if you had clicked the Add Quiz button in the Quizzes tool in the course menu. So alternate ways of creating a quiz. And we have two tabs here. We have the Details tab, which is basically test options, similar to the test options from Blackboard, and the Questions tab. We'll just do the test options first since it comes first. We've got plenty of time. So as we work our way down the test option, oh, and we have, of course, we can put in instructions. Which is probably more appropriate than the inscription found on the gates of hell in Dante's Inferno. So you can be as supportive or not as you prefer. But once we've provided instructions that appear at the top of the quiz, the test, we are asked to designate the quiz type, which could be a practice quiz, which is not graded, but is the student can take and get a score on and everything, but it's not submitted to the grade book, and no column for it appears in the grade book. So this is a great tool for giving students a chance to try out, first off, the quiz interface in Canvas with no risk. And it's really a pretty good teaching tool. I've known people who have put a practice quiz up that was basically similar to the quiz they were going to have graded, and given the students a chance to go through that a few times, especially if you combine that with if you have some question banks and let the students sort of work their way through that question bank, it can dramatically improve performance on the graded quiz later. So practice quizzes are a cool thing. It's a good idea to at least include one at the beginning of the course so that the students become familiar with how to take a quiz in Canvas before it means something. So if they're going to have problems, they can find out early on. But by far the most common option here, of course, is graded quiz. Or you can have a survey, which is graded, which I've never quite understood, or an ungraded survey, which is more likely. But the graded quiz is the usual selection there. The assignment group we already assigned, but we could change it here if we needed to. Then we have some options. Shuffle answers shuffles the answers on multiple answer and multiple choice questions. A fine idea for security so that nobody can ask someone what the answer to question number 5 was and find out that it was C and have it do them any good. However, this sort of precludes answers like all of the above or both B and C and things like that. So I don't normally recommend that, but that's up to you. You can set a time limit for the quiz. Minutes. You can allow multiple attempts if you wish. If you allow multiple attempts, you can select which score to keep, the highest, the most recent, or the average, the lowest is not an option there. That would be dirty pool. And if you want them to have a limited number of multiple attempts, you can specify that number, maybe 2. The multiple attempts are especially useful with practice quizzes, where you can allow the student to take a practice quiz as often as they like. Or you can use a quiz as sort of say a module ending quiz as sort of a barrier to the next module. You can allow the students to take quiz multiple times, but keep the latest score and let the student take it and take it and take it until they reach a certain level, which is set as a prerequisite for the next module. So you can prevent the student from moving on to the next module until they've done well enough on the previous module to justify it, which is a nice bit of pedagogy. So that's why some of these options are here, but more often than not, that multiple attempts will not be selected. You can set feedback options here. It's similar to what we had in Blackboard, though again, in Blackboard you had a few more options than you have here, but these are pretty decent. You can the default is to let students see their quiz responses and see what they missed right away. You can let them see that as often as they like, or you can let them see it only once after they submit the attempt, each attempt. You can choose to let students see correct answers or not. And if you choose to let them see correct answers, you can limit when they see those correct answers, either only after their last attempt, which is probably a good idea, or you can set a date and a time for when they can see those correct answers, and you can even hide the correct answers later if you wish. A little different philosophy than what Blackboard had, but very functional. If you just check this and don't fill in any of these dates or this option here, the students will see the correct answers right away, which may be appropriate for a low stakes weekly quiz or something, or a practice quiz, but may not be appropriate in other cases. Pretty obvious. You can choose to show the students only one question at a time so that they're not distracted and scrolling up and down. I always hated that myself as a student, but there are pedagogical justifications for doing that, certainly. Something you would decide. And we often recommended against that in Blackboard because Blackboard had an uncomfortable habit of crashing the test in between one question and the next when it was showing one at a time. And it was just a higher risk option. That's not so much with Canvas. If you do select one question at a time, you can prevent the students from going back and changing their answers. So, or not, as you prefer. But I'm just going to leave that blank. You can restrict access to the quiz if you don't. Let's say you have a proctoring situation. You don't want the student to be able to get in until they've gone to the proctor, and you can provide the proctor with an access code so that the student has to go to the proctor to get into the test. That's the most common application for that. Or if you just don't, there are probably other reasons why you might require a password basically for the test. Or you can filter IP addresses. If you want the students to say take the test only on campus and you know what the IP range is that would be used, you can set that, but that's unlikely to be useful in a fully online class, for instance, where you don't know where the students could be coming in from. Though you can filter, say, overseas IP addresses out in case they're paying somebody in Singapore to take it for them. Unlikely to be worth doing. And once again, we have our assignment options. You can assign to everyone or only to certain students, and you can control when the students, if a particular student needs to access the test early or late, you can use the same functionality once again to assign, to give certain students extra or earlier or later access to the test, just like we did with the assignment, same process. You can set due dates. That's one we don't want to copy into another semester or another year. It is leap year, isn't it? And we can set availability dates from and until. Which with a test is probably appropriate. Even more so than with a homework assignment. And we can then save the options. So what we have now is a test with options, but no questions. Probably we need to provide some questions. So we go back into Edit, we go to the Questions tab. And there are basically 3 options for providing questions for this test. We can type the questions right into Canvas. We can select questions from question banks that we've created or uploaded to Canvas. Or we can have Canvas pick them for us and randomly generate a test, a different test for each student using the question groups. Let's talk about adding questions first. We just click New Question and we get a question editor where we can create a question. We can give it a title. We can just call it question 1, or I'm going to call this Snag It question 1. We'll see why in a minute. Here are your possible question types in Canvas. They are quite similar to the question types we had in Blackboard. There's some here we didn't have in Blackboard and some missing here that we did have in Blackboard, but basically these cover most of the types of questions that you'd use on a pen and paper test, and some things that you probably wouldn't do that way. Multiple choice is at the top of the list, by far the most common objective test question, but perhaps not the best. True, false, fill in the blank, fill in multiple blanks in a sentence. Multiple students' absolute unfavorite question, multiple answers, a multiple choice question with more than one right answer. Multiple drop downs where students get it's kind of like a fill in the blank question, except they get a drop down menu and they get to select the answers from that. That's a little bit that's not something I recall as having in Blackboard. Standard matching questions. Numerical answer question, where they have to put in an answer to a computation. A formula question, where they evaluate a formula. Essay question, common type, where they just type something. There's no, all they get is a question and a text box or an editor window where they can type in their answer online. File upload question, where they upload a file to answer a question. Or you can just create text here, which is just a text header in the middle of a test. So it's not really a question. It's just something like the next 5 questions refer to the diagram provided here, and you put the diagram in the editor box here as one possible use of that text option there. So these are all pretty straightforward things we've seen before. I'm just going to start with let me see what I have over here. A multiple choice question. And I've got a question typed down here. I'm not going to make you watch me type. I just put the text of the question into the text editor here. I can include images if appropriate. I can include videos if appropriate. I can include I can search for YouTube videos to include if appropriate, or I can record a little talking head video of myself, a webcam video right here if appropriate, and put any of that in this question text box here. Vast majority of the time this will just contain the text of the question. So which of the following is a particular advantage of snagging? All right, there's the question. It's a multiple choice question. So by default, I've got 4 answers. I can add more answers if I need them, but 4 will usually do it. My first answer, how do I upload test banks to Canvas? I'm going to show you. Good question. If you have a test bank, can you load from the test bank? Yes, but not from here. That's find questions, another button. Good questions. Okay, that came from the chat tool, benefit of the recording. Okay, some answers I have for this is, here's one possible answer. It's completely free. Another possible answer, remember this is an advantage of a tool called Snagit for screencasting. You don't have to know what that is to get an idea of what I'm doing here. The answer in this case is it allows extensive editing of recorded videos, or recorded screencasts. There's a possible answer. Third possible answer, its workflow is especially efficient. And last possible answer is the only tool that allows you to record PowerPoint narration. So there are my answers. At this point, I need to, before saving the question, I need to make sure that I have the correct answer specified, and that is the third one here. Its workflow is especially efficient. I do that just by clicking in this column here opposite the answer that is correct. I also have the option to enter comments, both positive and negative. If a student picks this answer, correct and incorrect, and I can so I can put in generic comments or positive or negative comments depending on whether they get it right or wrong. So I have that option with Canvas. But now I can just update the question and it goes into the test. At this point, by default, I have 1 point, but I can edit that right here. Let's say I want to make that a 2-point question. And I can update it. And I can always change the correct answer if I get it wrong, things like that. But there's a question in this test that I've created manually. The process is quite similar for if now I want to add another new question that I am creating from scratch, I just hit new question again, and I just go through the process again. And again, I can select any of these question types and proceed. The process is quite straightforward in all of these. And there are tutorials, Canvas tutorials provided by Instructure online that will show you how to create and manage any of these questions. I just wanted to give you a feeling for the most common type of question here. So I'll just cancel out of that one. So I've added a question to the test manually. That's one option. Second option here is to pick questions from test banks, from question banks, they're called in Canvas, that have been uploaded to Canvas. We've already had a question on how can you upload a question or a question bank to Canvas. I'm going to cover that one at the end, if I may. But let's say we have some test banks or question banks in our Canvas course. They may have come over from Blackboard, or from your Blackboard course, or they may have been uploaded by you to your question bank collection in Canvas, which you can do. Most of the test banks that are loaded into Blackboard will also load into Canvas. Canvas and Blackboard both use what's called a QTI test bank format, and you can upload those into Canvas easily. I'll show you how to do that before we finish here. But let's assume we already have a test bank. If I want to select specific questions from a test bank, that is, questions that will be given to every student, not randomly selected, but selected by me and placed into the test manually so that all students will see that question. In other words, this just saves me having to retype the question. I can go to Find Questions. I can select the test bank that I want to use. How about Screencasting General here? It gives me a preview of the questions. And I won't worry about question groups yet. That's our next topic. I can select individual questions, or I can select them all if I want them all. But let's say I just want this one. When I've selected what I want here, I just click Add Questions, and that question or questions, plural, goes into the test. If I want to see more detail on the questions, I can check this box here, and that will actually show me that this is an essay question, where this is a multiple choice question, and I can actually see the answers. It's helpful to be able to hide and display that as you're moving on, so you don't have quite as much clutter on the screen at times. But that's all there is to selecting a question from a test bank specifically. This is selecting a specific question to display to all students. If we want to get fancier and we want to have Canvas select questions from designated test banks at random, so that no two students get exactly the same test, we have to go to question groups. Question groups are comparable to question sets in Blackboard. Quite similar. So if we want to create a group of questions that will be provided to students, that will be inserted into this test as students take it, we just select Add Question Group. And our previous questions remain here visible, so we can look back at them and make sure we don't duplicate them or whatever. And we have to give the question group a name so we can refer back to it. I'm just going to call this Testing Question Group 1, but I could call it anything that made sense here. The students won't see that. You will see that. And as with Blackboard, we were able to pick how many questions we're going to pick and how many points each question should be worth. But before we can really do that intelligently, we need to link this group to a question bank. To do that, we have to click that link there, and then we'll be given a list of all of the question banks available in the course. Course survey, well, that doesn't have anything to do with screencasting, so I don't want that. Question bank for why screencasting might be appropriate here, but that's got no questions in it, so I don't want to use that. Pool for screencasting, that looks like a good possibility. There's 7 questions in there. And so here's a quiz for Camtasia Relay. Let's pick this question bank right here and select that. That links that bank to this group. If you want to look at that question bank before you do this, we need to be outside this test. So I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to show you how to do that in a minute. We do need to, before we create the group, we do need to tell Canvas how many questions to pick from that group. In other words, how many questions will be selected automatically from this question bank for each student. There were 7 questions there. You rarely want to select them all. There'd be no point in creating a question group in that case. So let's say we're going to select 3 questions at random out of that group for each student, with the assumption that each student will get a different set of 3 questions. That's obviously not completely true. There's a statistical probability, a finite probability that 2 students will get the same 3 questions, but it's pretty unlikely that it's going to happen very often anyway. And how many questions do we want to, how many points do we want each question to be worth? Maybe 2. That depends on your needs, especially if you're weighting your grades by individual gradable item. You will have to carefully pick the number of points that you want for each question in order to make the total value for the test a particular number. Everything's good. We got, we're picking 3 out of 7 questions at 2 points per question. We've linked it to the bank pool for screencasting. So now we just create the group, and it shows up as just a group of questions. And it tells you that there are going to be 3 of them, but it doesn't show you what they are, obviously, because they're going to be different for each student. So we have created a quiz. We've selected the options for that quiz as to time limits and number of attempts and things like that. So how do we, and we've added enough questions to it for it to be 13 points. If you feel that's an unlucky number, you can go back and change. You can always go back and edit one of the questions and make that a 3-point question instead of a 2-point question, and update the questions. And now it's 14 points. Fine. When I had my hip replaced, I was able to get in and get my get the operation done 2 or 3 weeks earlier than they'd originally told me, because I was willing to take a surgery appointment on the 13th of the month. So far, that's turned out to be lucky for me. Right? And once all the changes are made and everything, you save the quiz, and it is ready to go. You can preview it here, just so you see what it's going to look like. So, and here are our randomly questions 3, 4, and 5 are randomly selected questions from that question bank. So everything looks good. This is what the interface looks like for the students. They can select answers to the questions in the usual way. They can type answers to essay questions in here. By the way, there is no short answer question type. in like there was in Blackboard. That was kind of redundant. Short answer was just a short essay question. So they just use the essay question type, and the answer can be as short as is appropriate here. So you don't need a separate question type for that. Here's another essay question. Here's another excuse me a second.
Thank you.
Subaru.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Mhm. And one of the advantages of being at home. The so a perfectly straightforward process, though again, it's a good idea to give the students a practice quiz before they actually do this, and it's where it's gonna, in a situation where it's gonna count. The question list over here shows the students which questions they've completed at a glance so they don't miss one accidentally. There's a timer that runs, shows them how much time they have left, and tells them when it's due. And if they've started the test less than 20 minutes, in this case, if they started the test without enough time to complete it or without enough time to get the full amount of time that you've specified, the due date and time override the question, the time limit that you place on the test. So if they start at 10 minutes before the end of the availability time, they're only going to get 10 minutes to take the quiz. In Blackboard, it would give them the full time, but it would mark the attempt late if they submitted it after the due date time. Canvas takes a more structured approach to that. They just don't give them, they don't allow them to submit a quiz after the due date, or after the until date, I'm sorry, excuse me. So all this information available to the students. So that's what it looks like to a student. Very straightforward, very similar to what Blackboard used to, but used to look like, but even better. If I go back now, I can go back and edit the quiz again. I can make sure everything's right, and I can save it. I can then publish it here, or I can go to the module and publish it from there if I prefer. If, assuming I've linked it into the module already, I can publish it right here. So now it's visible to students. Your students will be able to see it. Will be able to take it according to the availability dates that you have set. It won't appear to them until after the initial availability date is passed, and it will disappear after the final availability date, or the until date has passed. Question banks, management of question banks is an important thing, and we have a question on that. That's good. Oh, and quizzes, of course, are graded. The objective parts of quizzes are graded automatically by the system. Subjective questions, essay questions, are not, obviously. In the case of a test that contains an essay question, what you will see in the gradebook is not a number, but an indicator, an icon that indicates that there's something in the quiz that needs to be graded manually. You can click on that icon, go to the speed grader, you'll see the objective questions graded in the speed grader. Well, that looks like, not quite sure why that one was flagged. I'll have to look. Normally you'd see an essay question here. You even have the opportunity to fudge the grade if you need to. The and I believe those fudge points can be negative too. But normally you'd see a red banner here. I'm not quite sure again why this one was flagged. You see a red banner indicating that a question needs grading, and you can type in the appropriate number of points for an essay question and move on. You can even use a rubric with an essay question if you need to, and then just submit the grade.
Is it maybe because they the student didn't hit the submit button and just
That
left
could be.
If you
That
and
may
if you
be
hit the grade or submit the changes, it'll go away.
Let's see. Nope.
Oh.
Well, that's possible. I don't know what I did when I took that test as that test student, but this is what you would see in the event of a test with an essay question or a manually gradable question.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. And I don't want to forget here, we're down to the last 3 minutes. I want to be sure that you see how to manage, load, and otherwise handle your question banks. You do that, those are associated with a particular course. So you have to be in the course where you want the question banks to be or where they're currently located. And to access the question banks, you go to the quizzes tool in the course menu, which is the secret to it. And the other secret is, and this is a little uncharacteristic of the Canvas interface, is you have to know that under this menu icon up here in the far upper right of the quizzes tool, right next to the add quiz button, is a manage question banks option. If you select that, you'll see a list of the question banks in the course. To look at the questions within the question bank, you click on the name of the question bank and you'll see the questions. So this is where I could have gone and looked to see if this pool was in fact appropriate for that quiz that I created. It was, I knew that in advance, but this is how I knew because I'd looked at it. These question banks, as I said, may have come over from your Blackboard course. If you had question pools in your Blackboard course, they came over as question banks in Canvas. You can manually create question banks by clicking this Add Question Bank icon here. You can give the bank a name. You can go into that and you can add questions, just in the same way that you added questions to a test. So you can create a bank this way. You can also, in other banks, move questions from one bank to another. You can move copy question to another bank. And I can put it in manually created bank, and I'll keep a copy of this question in this bank. This allows a copy, or if I uncheck this, it moves the question to the new bank. So I just move copy question. And now if I go back and look at my manually created bank that I just made, there's a question in there. And yet that question's still in the other one as well, in this case, since I did a copy instead of a move. Most of us, of course, are going to acquire our question banks from a publisher or from a publisher's question bank tool. How do you get those into Canvas? Well, hopefully your publisher has supplied the question bank to you, either as in the form of a tool where you can create banks, selections of questions or question banks yourself, or they've provided the bank to you as a zip file in the form of the so-called QTI 1 or 2 file, which will import into Canvas. So whether you've just been handed the test bank file from your rep, maybe on a CD or something, or on in an email, or whether you've been given a tool like Respondus or Easy Quiz, or what's the other one? Cengage's tool. Oh, escapes my mind right now. Any one of the publishers' test bank test bank creation tools have the option to export collections of quiz questions as a QTI file, or a file compatible with Canvas or Blackboard. So either whether you get it directly from the publisher or you create that file from the publisher's tool, to get those question banks into Canvas, you go to the settings link on your course menu. You go to, in the task menu over on the right, you go to import course content. And quite likely, the imported file is going to be a QTI zip file. It's possible somebody's provided you with a Canvas course export package or the Blackboard export package that has test questions in it, but most likely it's, if you get it directly from the publisher, or if you create it from the publisher's tool, it's going to be a qti.zip file. You choose the file. I think I have one here. This is actually one that I created myself in a roundabout way, so I'll open that. You don't have to select question bank in this case, because this export file already has the question bank name in it. Though you can put these questions into a already existing question bank if you like, or create otherwise one will automatically be created, the new one will. We don't want to overwrite anything. We just click import. You get the usual import dialog. It goes to run, queued, running, completed. There are only a couple of questions in that bank. So now if I go back to quizzes and look, I happen to know that one is called. And if I go to my menu and manage question banks, actually I got two copies of that one now. I called that test quiz 1, that bank test quiz 1. And there are 2 new questions that were imported. So that's all there is to importing a question bank. Can you import from Blackboard question banks, or do we have to start over? No, you can import your Blackboard question banks. You can export your Blackboard question banks from Blackboard. And yes, our Blackboard system is still there. We have to keep it for 2 years. We can't use it to teach. We can't routinely give people access to it. But if you have some question banks in a course in Blackboard that did not get brought over to Canvas before we turn Blackboard off, quote unquote, we can get you back in there. You can export those question banks from Blackboard, and those exports will import right into Canvas. In fact, that question bank that I just imported was one that I exported from a version of Blackboard. So you do not have to start over. Absolutely not. You can get those question banks out of Blackboard. And though if you moved all your content from Blackboard into a Canvas development shell at some point, those question banks should probably be in that Canvas course. Just go to the quizzes tool and go to manage test banks and look, or manage question banks and look and see if they're not already there. But we can certainly do that. Any final questions? We're going to run a little over. Sorry about that. I'll try not to do that. It's a delight to see you today. I'm happy to answer questions as long as you have them. If anybody does. Let me stop my share and see if anybody's even still there. Yeah, there's a few of you there. Any final questions? Thanks, Kathy. There is one question I can think of that I sometimes get at this point. I have a bunch of questions that have been supplied to me as a Word document. Is there any way to get those into Canvas automatically? And the answer is maybe. And interrupt me if you have another question, but this is something I did do some research on today, so I'll share it with you if you want to wait. Canvas does not provide any direct functionality to help you do that. Nominally, you're supposed to be able to use an application called Respondus to do that. Respondus has what's called a test parser built into it that will convert a properly formatted Word document into a format that can then be exported from Respondus in a QTI zip file, which you can import into Canvas. Anecdotally, I've seen indications online that that doesn't work very well. Respondus has always been a bit of a problem. And I've had people tell me it doesn't work well with Canvas, but that could be wrong. I don't have any personal experience of that. I haven't had a copy of Respondus in 15 years that I can think of. And Respondus is a fairly expensive application. It ain't free. So the question becomes, is there a free way to do that? And yeah, there is. It's not guaranteed to work, and it only works with certain question types, but it's still out there. It's and I'm not going to show you this because I don't know if you're really interested, but if you are, I can give you more detailed directions. Basically, there's an old application, an online application that's still out there, provided by, of all people, the College of Southern Idaho. And this has been true for 10, 15 years, for at least 15, 20 years. They've had this up online. That was designed to work with Blackboard. It does not work with Canvas, but you can feed it. You can, if your Word questions are formatted in a particular, fairly picky way, which is not difficult to, it's fairly standard. You have the question, and your multiple choice answers are on single lines below that, and they're designated A, B, C, D, whatever, and you have an asterisk that designates the correct answer and so on. There's a set of formatting rules, but they're not hard to follow if you're either typing questions into Word, or if you have questions in Word already. It's not difficult to convert them into this format in Word. You then copy and paste the questions into the tool online, and it creates a zip file that can be imported into Blackboard. But as near as I can tell, you can't. I've tried importing that same file into Canvas, but apparently it's too old a format to work in Canvas. But it still works even in the latest version of Blackboard. So you say, what am I going to do? I don't have access to Blackboard. Well, we can give you temporary access to Blackboard for this purpose. Or you can just go and get yourself a free Blackboard account on something called Course Sites, which is the free trial version of Blackboard that's out there on the online, out there on the web. You can sign up for that for free. Tell them you're an instructor and you're looking at Blackboard. That's all you have to say. You can then import that file, zip file, from the test parser at Southern Idaho into the Blackboard, and then export it from the Blackboard, and the Blackboard converts that, then produces a zip file, a QTI zip file, which is compatible with Canvas. So then you can upload it into Canvas. I tried this today. It worked. That test bank file that I showed you, showed me importing it into Canvas, came out of or through that process. And it works like a charm for multiple choice questions, multiple answer, essay questions, true, false, and something else. I think fill in the blank is supposed to work, though I've never gotten it to work. So that covers most of the questions that you're ever going to get in a test, in a Word test bank. Those are usually going to be multiple choice questions. So you can take that Word file, you can format it properly, you can feed it to the test bank, the test parser at Sun, Idaho, to which I can give you a link. They're not maintaining it because they had the good sense to switch to Canvas some years ago as well, but they still have it up online. You can then download that file, import it into a Blackboard instance, export it in Blackboard, and then import it into Canvas. And at some point in the process, you're going to see Robin Hood's barn. If you've ever heard that old saying about to get there, you got to go around Robin Hood's barn. But it does work. If you're interested, if you have a real need for this, and you're going to have a pretty good need, but if you have a lot of questions that you'd really like to use with Canvas, and you only have them in Word document or some other text editor format, and you want to get them into Canvas without having to retype them or copy paste everything a bit at a time, we can probably make it work. So let me know. I'll show you how to do it. I may even put a tutorial online showing how to do that, though it does involve, to a certain degree, scamming Blackboard. I don't have any moral compunctions about doing that, but I don't want them coming after me either. So let me know if you're interested. And that's all I have for you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well, thank you for attending. Thanks for being here again.
We'll see you on Friday morning.
We'll be doing something again on Friday morning. What am I doing then? Oh, YouTube. How to use YouTube. Yeah, we're going to go into the everything you ever wanted to know about YouTube that we're uninterested in asking. And
getting rid of the ads.
And how to get rid of the ads. I will show you how to get rid of the ads. So great. See you then. Take care.
See you then.
Bye-bye.